So today I wanted to touch on decision making when it comes to starting something new or cutting something off from the that's ran past its time. And so when we're faced with these fork in the road moments of whether to continue, to start, stop, it can be very challenging, right? Because we're considering the implications of the next move. Kind of like on a chessboard, you make one move without thinking 4 or 5 steps ahead, like a professional, you'll end up setting yourself up for something detrimental, inevitably failure, right? And the challenge that we face when we stumble into these fork in the road moments in life is that we're constantly sprinting to the end result of what it might be or what it might not be before even taking the first step, right? Our mind at times can go to extremes of what the actual result might end up being. It's almost like when you prepare for a speech. For some of us, if we didn't prepare diligently, go over our lines, and we just kind of go in cold, especially for something that requires an informative type of speech and proposal, then what ends up happening is we go in there with a little bit of anxiety, thinking of the worst outcome because we're ill prepared. And so when it comes to decision making, you want to make sure that you've made the most diligent, well thought out choice when it comes time to make a critical decision in your life. Critical decisions are things like who to choose to be in a relationship with in terms of romantic relationship, what career path to choose, whether or not to start a business, where you choose to live, what city, state, or country, whether you should go to college or not go to college. All of these are some major choices in life. And it can be challenging when we live in a current society that provides so many options, right? In the words of Naval Ravikant, we're not biologically designed or wired to comprehend the magnitude of options that are readily available to us. And so because we have so many options, we think we have so much time, and it creates this farce and this illusion that, hey, we can just choose to do whatever we want whenever. We've got all the time in the world. But being in this Western culture in America, things like that does come more seamlessly, right? There are many more freedoms here to where it does afford us the opportunity to try over again something. Whereas in other cultures, you might not get a do-over. Maybe you got one shot, and if you don't make that happen, it ain't gonna happen. And that's why what you tend to see is when there's a lot of immigrants that do come to the US, especially from a business standpoint, a lot more tend to become more entrepreneurial, and they usually are laser focused, right? I remember I had a friend, his family came from South Korea when I was in middle school. They stayed in like some refugee camp or something like that before they came over. But the family started a cleaners, and I just remember they went from one cleaner to two, and then from 2 to 4, they just expanded and scaled. And they came here with that mindset that, hey, there's just one thing I'm going to stay focused on. It's make or break. We're going to make the most out of this whether times get hard or rough, we're just going to plow through this with brute force and make this thing work. And they did. And the family was able to thrive. But that's that immigrant mentality when it comes to decision making, that each choice is carefully thought about, and all the distraction and noises are blinded away, like with horse blinders on. And so you tend to see that with those groups of folks in terms of immigrants who come over, because they know they might only have one shot and they're not going to waste it, right? They're not going to waste the resources that they have. They're going to figure out, how can I be resourceful with what I have, especially if they didn't come from wealth. So when it comes to making decisions, you've probably found yourself in moments where you're holding on to something so tightly, but you know it's not the best for you, but you just don't know how to cut it off. Whether it's something you're pursuing tied to your career, or whether it's a personal relationship you're in. It could be some friend that you know doesn't align with your values, that you've simply outgrown each other, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing. That's a natural thing that happens in humans. We evolve, we change, and we have different interests, right? And that is true for many dynamics we have in life. And adjustments are made accordingly, right? At one point in time, you're a baby in the cradle. Your parents, if you're fortunate enough to have both or one, or other family members that acted as parents to you, they were able to nurture you and take care of you and be around you. But as you grew older, the dynamic of what that relationship looked like for most people shifted, right? They weren't cradling you like a baby anymore, pampering you. You know, some parents were more strict, and if you acted up, you got a whooping. Others, they socialized and communicated with you to mitigate issues. The point is that dynamic shifts and evolves, right? And then once you turn 18, for many Americans, you go off and you may move out of the house and go to college, or at some point live off on your own somewhere and start working a job. So that whole dynamic has shifted and changed. And so when it comes to facing a tough decision, whether to cut something off or someone, just realize it's okay that that relationship has run its course. It's literally no different than most of you who work for some employer, some corporation that you've been with for a year or 2 years, a few years, maybe even 10 years. But then all of a sudden you feel like leaving. And if I were to look at your resume, it most likely will show more than one employer, right? Or you can look at it as more than one relationship. You might have 2 relationships, 3, 4 different employers, 4 different relationships. Now, does that make you a bad person or them a bad person? No. It just means one or the other or both outgrew the situation, or there is a need or desire that's no longer being served. And so the time for shifting has come, and that's okay. We're innately designed biologically to evolve, to adapt. And through adaptation is where we experience growth. And so this is something to be expected. There should be no shock there. So when facing decisions on whether to cut something off, you have to ask yourself, does this help serve me in a way that allows me to reach my ultimate desired goal? A good pointer from Naval again is, he states, if you find yourself making a pros and cons list about a critical decision, then the answer is no, right? Like, that's the intuitive, reflexive response that may come up and perhaps should come up, because anytime you find yourself struggling over a decision where it doesn't naturally flow, where it's not a natural gut instinct of like, wow, that makes sense, like it feels exhilarating and it's visceral, if you find yourself having to really justify, where you have to break out and write pros and cons, it probably isn't the best decision. I see this happen a lot when it comes to home buying. You'll see people looking at their finances, they're looking at the market, and they're just mimicking what they've been preached to, which is, hey, when you hit this certain stage in life, you got to buy a home. It's the best investment you'll ever make. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what starting the foundation of building a family looks like, right? That's a specific narrative, right? But that narrative doesn't fit everyone. It doesn't fit every culture. It just isn't a one size fits all. It's not viable for everyone either, and that's okay. But when facing such a decision, if you're sitting there trying to make a pros cons list and there's a lot of emphasis in the financial part, right? Then right there and then, at least for that phase of life, maybe the answer is more so no than it is a yes. Right? If the reasons are from a foundational baseline, you already have, let's just say, healthy finances, relatively speaking, for what you're trying to purchase, but you're wanting to move into a home, say 3-bedroom, 3-bath, because you're about to expand your family, have 1, 2, 3 kids, or you already have a kid, and now you're trying to add 1 or 2 more. And then you're in a more, say, settled lifestyle to where you're going to be in the area for more than 5+ years. And career-wise, it seems somewhat stable in terms of you sticking in that career. Right? We can't predict what happens externally in terms of corporate layoffs or job layoffs or any random scenarios like that. But if you have a strong desire to stay in a certain career path, then at least that you'll have the funds available that are steady to be able to pay the mortgage, right? But if that's not the case, and you find yourself making this pros and cons, like you're undecided, if you're still undecided on whether you should or shouldn't stay in a city, right? You're still contemplating between, hey, should we stay here, or do we think we're going to move here to this other city in 3 years or 5? If you're still wrestling over that factor, if you're